Trump confirmed he has greenlit CIA covert operations in Venezuela, and that ground attacks might be next. By Elizabeth Melimopoulos and Sarah Shamim. United States President Donald Trump confirmed on Wednesday that he has authorized the CIA to carry out secret operations in Venezuela. The New York Times first disclosed the directive, quoting U.S. officials who privately said the administration's strategy is focused on removing President Nicolas Maduro from power. Trump also said his administration was mulling a land attack on Venezuela, amid sharply escalating tensions after multiple U.S. strikes on Venezuelan boats in the Caribbean Sea in recent weeks and a troop buildup in those waters, ordered by the U.S. president. Maduro appeared on national television Wednesday night, urging restraint and cautioning against any further escalation. No to regime change that reminds us of the failed wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya. No to coup d'etat carried out by the CIA. Latin America does not want them, does not need them, and rejects them, said the Venezuelan president in response to Trump's announcement. So what might Trump be planning? Are his moves legal? How has Venezuela responded? And what does history tell us about what covert CIA operations in Latin America might look like? What has Trump announced? Why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? A journalist asked the U.S. president at a White House news conference. I authorized for two reasons, really, Trump said. Number one, they, Venezuela, have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. And the other thing are drugs. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela. And a lot of the Venezuelan drugs come in through the sea, so you get to see that. But we're going to stop them by land also, he added. When asked if the CIA had the authority to take out Maduro, Trump demurred, refusing to rule out regime change, though not committing to it either. Oh, I don't want to answer a question like that. That's a ridiculous question for me to be given. Not really a ridiculous question, but it would be a ridiculous question for me to answer. But I think Venezuela is feeling heat, Trump added. What operations has the U.S. already carried out? The U.S. has carried out at least 5 strikes on boats in Venezuelan waters, alleging that the boats were carrying drugs, and killing a total of 27 people. The latest attack took place on Tuesday, Trump said, under my standing authorities as Commander-in-Chief. This morning, the Secretary of War ordered a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel affiliated with a designated terrorist organization, DTO, conducting narco-trafficking in the U.S. Southcom area of responsibility, just off the coast of Venezuela. Trump wrote in a post on his Truth Social platform. He added that 6 male narco-terrorists aboard the vessel were killed. The first U.S. strike on a Venezuelan boat was on September 2nd, killing 11 people. 2 more attacks were carried out on September 15th and 19th, each killing 3 people. A 4th strike occurred on October 3rd, with U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reporting 4 people killed. Trump and his administration have so far not provided any evidence that these bombed boats were carrying narcotics headed for the U.S. Can the president launch secret or military actions without Congress? Experts have previously told Al Jazeera that U.S. strikes on Venezuelan boats possibly broke international law and went against the U.S. Constitution. Declared operations on Venezuelan land, whether by the CIA or the U.S. military, would go even beyond maritime strikes in testing the legal authority of the president. Salvador Santino Regilme, an associate professor at Leiden University in the Netherlands, explained to Al Jazeera last month that the use of deadly force during maritime operations must respect the right to life and adhere to the principles of law, enforcement, necessity, and proportionality. UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and the 1988 UN Drug Trafficking Convention emphasize cooperation, boarding, and consent mechanisms at sea, not summary destruction. Any strike that kills suspected traffickers should trigger a prompt, independent, and transparent investigation, Regilme said. Constitutional lawyer Bruce Fine was even more definitive in his criticism of the U.S. maritime operations. Any use of the military except in self-defense to an actual attack requires express congressional statutory authorization. The military attack on the alleged Venezuelan drug traffickers was unconstitutional, Fine told Al Jazeera last month. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 is a federal law that requires the U.S. president to obtain congressional approval before committing to war. It also mandates that the president notify Congress within 48 hours of initiating any military action. Fine told Al Jazeera that there would need to be a public vote in Congress for the approval of such a strike, and such a vote has not taken place. At the beginning of his term, Trump designated Venezuelan drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. In a statement to Al Jazeera in August, Fine said this designation is illegal because it is contrary to the statutory standards to qualify as a foreign terrorist organization. The standards, according to the U.S. Constitution, are that a group must be based outside the U.S., involved in terrorist acts or activities, and its terrorism must pose a threat to the safety of U.S. citizens or to U.S. national security. Trump has also repeatedly alleged that Maduro's administration is behind the Venezuelan drug cartels that the U.S. administration has branded terrorist organizations, even though U.S. intelligence agencies have themselves said there is no evidence to back this assertion. How has Venezuela reacted? Venezuela accused the U.S. of violating international law and the United Nations Charter. The purpose of U.S. actions is to create legitimacy for an operation to change the regime in Venezuela, with the ultimate goal of taking control of all the country's resources, the government said in a statement. Maduro also rebuked the CIA's involvement in different parts of the world, without explicitly referencing Trump's authorization of the CIA to carry out operations in Venezuela. Carlos Pina, a Venezuelan political scientist, said Trump's announcement could unify Maduro's political base domestically. Today, the Venezuelan president once again denounced U.S. interference in Venezuela's internal affairs and, in particular, reinforced the anti-colonialist discourse that a large number of leftist governments and parties in the region have used in the past to oppose Washington's influence in their own countries, Pina said. That said, in practical, real-world terms, Trump's announcement will likely lead the Venezuelan government to increase its mechanisms of internal surveillance and repression, which, if left unchecked, could result in possible human rights violations. How have other Latin American countries responded? Colombian President Gustavo Petro responded to Trump's announcement on Wednesday, warning of the possible consequences for his country. He told attendees at an event being held in the southern Putumayo department, "Honestly, I'm not much of a fan of the policies pursued by the current government of Venezuela, but I do know what can happen in Colombia, and that is my responsibility if missiles start falling over there." Or, as announced today, if a violent operation begins by land carried out by CIA agents, they say, or by U.S. Marines, or as we already know, if missiles are launched at an unarmed civilian population, whether or not it is part of the drug trafficking chain. He added, because that would run counter to the United Nations Human Rights Commission's resolution, which unanimously approved the Colombian resolution, referring to the 2016 agreement between the Colombian government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC-EP, to end their long-standing conflict.